So I'm a lifetime iPhone user, starting with the very first iPhone, up until 6 months ago when I got so frustrated with the iPhone that I bought this Samsung Galaxy S24, which is a beautifully engineered piece of hardware and in almost every respect is infinitely superior to the iPhone. And yet, after 6 months on this beautiful piece of hardware, I'm going back to the iPhone. In this video, I'm going to explain to you why I got so frustrated with Apple that I left, the pros and cons of an Android phone like this S24, and ultimately why I decided I had to go back to Apple. Let's start with my frustrations with Apple that made me leave in the first place. Let's start with the most important, the battery life. I got sick and tired of the pathetic battery life of the iPhones. For some reason, Apple has it in their stupid little head that what we care about is how thin the phone is. No, we want a phone that will last an entire day on one charge. I want to leave it on my bike, full brightness with the map running for 8 hours and still have 40% charge at the end of the day. Is anyone from Apple listening? I don't think so. You don't listen to customers. So that was one frustration. The other frustration was the iPhone hardware is very sensitive to heat and shuts down when it's hot. I live in the desert and that's a big issue for me. I need something that stays bright and doesn't shut down when it's hot. The third thing was I got really tired of Apple playing the thought police and telling me what I could and could not put on my phone. Everything that goes to and from your phone has to go through their gateway, through their sync process. You can't just move a file to your phone. It's a pain in the ass if you have a PDF to get it on your phone, or if you have a legitimate CD, remember those, the little shiny discs? If you have a ripped CD of a CD you legitimately bought, they won't let you put that on your phone. It shouldn't be this difficult. And of course, the other frustration with Apple is their phones are overpriced. There's no two ways about it. The last thing that drove me crazy is I feel like I'm always having sword fights with my iPhone. It's like everything is swipe, 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 swipe. And when you have a case on, sometimes you have to swipe from the edge. And when there's a case on, it's really difficult to do. And a lot of times I would find myself like repeatedly having to swipe and not remembering. And the Android is far superior in that respect. So those are the reasons that I left the iPhone. Now let's talk about this amazing Galaxy S24. I don't know enough about Android to know if this is an Android feature or an S24 feature, but I absolutely love these 3 buttons down here that keep you from having to have sword fights with your iPhone. These are the equivalent of swipe. So this button shows you all the apps that are open. You don't have to swipe to do that. This puts you on the home screen, and this is the back button. Great. 3 things that I have to do the most often, I don't have to swipe. So I absolutely love that user interface feature. The second thing that's friggin' amazing about this S24 is the battery life. I can leave it on all day and still have 40% charge at the end of the day. It's just amazing. I've gone 2 days on a charge before. It's the way a phone should be. Apple, are you listening? The next thing that this phone is great for, and all Androids are, is the ease of getting files to and from your phone. You don't have to deal with the Apple police. You just connect it like you would a flash drive and move your files. It's the way it should be. The next thing I love about this Samsung S24 is the heat tolerance. I've had my iPhone and this S24 side by side in the sun. The iPhone will shut down for high temperature while this screen is still bright and happy. Speaking of screen brightness, this screen is significantly brighter than the iPhone. I believe we're talking like 1200 nits versus 1000 nits. I don't know, but it is brighter, visibly brighter. And the final thing I love about this hardware is it has a physical SIM. iPhone has gone to the eSIMs, which are fine for most people, but I travel and I like to be able to put the SIM in and out between different phones, and you can't do that with an eSIM. Not only that, when you travel, a lot of times they will not sell you a local eSIM unless you sign a year contract. We encountered that in France. So I love a physical SIM, and this has it, iPhone does not. So all that glowing review about the Android operating system and the Samsung S24, why on earth am I talking about going back to the Apple iPhone? Great question, because I did not do my research. Shame on me, I'm a bad engineer. So the first problem, I made the mistake of assuming that all the apps that were available on the Apple Store would be available through Android also. I mean, it's like Instagram, you can get it on both platforms. I just assumed everything would be on both platforms. That is not true. The worst thing is the iPhone has something called CarPlay. And all I do is connect the cable to my Boxster, and I can play music through the Bose sound system in the Boxster. The map shows up on the screen, so the GPS is shown up on the main screen in the car. CarPlay is great. And of course you can just do that with the Android, right? Well, no. CarPlay with the Android is only available on 2 models of Porsches. I believe it's the Cayenne and something else. So I have this great phone. There is no way for me to play music on my car. That's friggin' ridiculous in this day and age. Next, this is something that only applies to me and pilots. ForeFlight is a flight planning and navigation app that runs on iPhone. It's made by Boeing. Huge company. Of course it's going to be an Android. Nope. And that's something, they do have a web version. The problem is when you're flying, you may or may not have cell coverage. It has to work offline. You can't use a web version offline. So that was a major disappointment. ForeFlight was one of the major apps that I used my phone for. That was one of my major applications. The other one, which I also got burned on, something that probably doesn't apply to you. I use offline GPS maps a lot. On the Apple iPhone, I use an application called Mapout, M-A-P-O-U-T. And it downloads the free OpenStreetMaps database for the maps. And then it has an amazing ability. It'll let you track your course. You can save all the routes you've ever done. And I thought, of course, Android is going to have one. And the best app is one called Organic Maps, but they do not have the tracking feature, which I absolutely need. So the 2 things that I use my phone for the most, the ForeFlight and the offline GPS maps, were not available on this. Well, and plus being able to play music on my car. So that unfortunately, is a deal breaker for me. The last thing I found, which sounds really stupid, but it's very true. The blue bubble, green bubble, it's even worse than they say. Since I have transferred to this Galaxy S24, I have been cut off from my group of college friends. We have like a group chat, and it's not that they're like, oh, he's Android, I'm not talking to them. The problem is the iMessage system is insidious. I made the mistake of coupling my iMessage account to 2 of my email accounts and my phone number. So then what happened was when I went to this phone, the text messages had to go to this phone instead of iMessage. There's a way to pull that out. But the thing is, you can have iMessage with just email, but for some reason, it never ever worked right after I pulled the phone number out. So I wasn't able to communicate with my group of friends. I know that could be solved, but it's a pain in the ass. It's a real pain in the ass. So I do hope Apple gets its butt kicked on that one. And that they offer equivalent functionality to Android users. So those are the reasons that I am going to have to go back to iPhone. But I'll probably use an older iPhone that actually has a physical SIM. So let's wrap this up in what I would recommend for you, iPhone or Android. First of all, look at the functions that you need to do. Which apps do you use? If you have all the apps available on Android, I would definitely go with Android. And the Galaxy S24, whatever the S series model you get, they're amazing phones. Much better value than the Apple iPhone. On the other hand, if you're a pilot, you got to get an iPhone. If you're someone who does outdoor activities and need an offline GPS map, you kind of need an iPhone. The problem is there is no perfect phone. You just have to choose the things that are most important to you and decide which phone suits those the best. I also want to talk about the transition between phones because I'm an engineer and even I was daunted by this. It's like, at this point, people out there are going to say, well, it's easy. There's this software that just transfers all your contacts. And it's like, yeah, it does that. And that's like 1% of the work. So yeah, you can get your contacts and things like that transferred. But I had no idea how many apps I had that require username and password and configuration. So, you know, I was able to get my Android up and running in the first day with all the apps I thought I needed. And then the thing is, for the next month, every day, I'd go to do something and it's like, oh, I didn't install that app. Have to install the app, figure out what the password is, the username, get it configured, working. And that kept on for a month. So it's a lot of work, not to mention the iMessage disaster if you're trying to deal with that. So the transition between phones, although it seems simple, and the phones are basically similar in operating system. I mean, it just takes a while to figure out where the different settings are within the settings area, but they're both logical, both iPhone and Android. Just minor differences. If you know how to use an iPhone, you can figure out an Android and vice versa. The learning curve is not that steep, but definitely it's more work than you think. So if you're going to switch, just be prepared for it taking 6 months before you're comfortable. So after 6 months, I was very comfortable on my Galaxy S24, except that it doesn't do what I need it to do, which is my fault because I didn't do my research. I naively assumed that it would do the same applications as the iPhone. So there you have it. I hope this was helpful in your decision to move to or from Android, iPhone, or your first purchase decision. Thanks for watching. Auf Wiedersehen.